Can you beat a randomizer hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokemon Infinite Fusion using only Dragon-type fusions? Well, in a challenge where there aren't many encounters and any Pokemon that faints has to be boxed forever, losing even a single team member could spell the end for the whole run down the line. There's also the issue in a randomizer of finding dragons at all, and I'm very lucky one of my starter options is Gibquill, even though it does kind of look like Gibble's beta sprite the day after ending the night with Taco Bell. As for encounters, every route I'll have a choice. Either I capture the first encounter I run into and I can use those Pokemon to fuse with my dragons, or I search the route for the first dragon I can find, but if there isn't one, I've lost my encounter for that route. And on Route 1, I find Bidoof, and hey, I'll certainly take it. In the early game, I've got to try and find dragons, because if I run out of Pokemon, I lose the challenge. So I was very happy to see Diash on Route 22. However, this fusion of Oddish and Dino is a dark poison type, so I've got to refuse it in order to get my challenge legal grass dragon type. Unfortunately, just before Brock, my Gibquill evolved. Not exactly an upgrade. As we enter the battle versus Brock, the extreme randomizer means we could be facing anything. And despite our grass dragon having a pretty significant weakness versus the bug-flying Beedrio, we actually have a bit of an advantage here, as long as we can barely survive the Twineedle, that is. With low-level Dragon Rage, the early game should be pretty manageable for our dragons. Dragon Rage generally stops one-shotting in the mid-teens, so it won't even be as useful by the time we get to Misty, but even having a reliable 2-hit KO move into the mid to late 20s is an enormous win for our dragon types, since they're generally incredibly weak towards the start of the game. We're actually not even able to one-shot Brock's ace, but with a quick attack, we pick up the win. Heading towards Mount Moon, I pass through Route 3, where my first encounter is a Meowinch. And not only is Trapinch perfect turning into a dragon type, but Meowth is a really good Pokemon to fuse with because of Technician. Because Mount Moon has so many floors and thus so many possible encounters, I decide to run around until I find a dragon in Goomander. There really aren't that many dragon encounters in the game, so already having 5 counting Trapinch is amazing. With the new level cap so high, we're able to evolve a lot of our Pokemon. Bidoof evolves into Bebarrel, and with a quick fusion reversal, it ends up looking a lot better. As for our other team members able to evolve, they sadly don't have custom fusions and end up looking a lot worse. Mr. Pass? Couldn't have named it better myself, that's a hard pass. Facing Misty, we still only get to use 2 Pokemon, so having a team of 4 doesn't actually help us. Misty leads with Machia. Oh, fuck. I knew this challenge would be brutal, but if we end up losing a ton of Pokemon now, there's no going back since there are so few encounters for us to get. Thankfully, Gablava is faster with Dragon Rage, and we only have to tank a bite. And as Misty goes for a Super Potion, I knew I have her Machia beat. What I didn't know is that a couple of Dragon Rages would reveal a much bigger problem. A Fairy Steel type is about as bad a matchup as our dragons can have. Switching would mean guaranteed defeat, so I have to go for Flame Wheel. It doesn't do much, but by some miracle from Arceus, I managed to get a burn. Because Clefzor's holding a red card, I get swapped out into Goomelion. And without that burn, this double slap would have done 2/3 of Goomelion's health. This fight could still go south at any moment, so I go for Protect to get a little bit more burn damage. The next double slap hits 3 times, taking Slimelion below half health, meaning it would be KO'd by now without the burn. I go for a Fire Fang, and with a critical hit, I really lucked out of this disastrous matchup versus Misty. Is it just me, or does my team look ugly as fuck? Fortunately, on Route 24, I'm blessed by a very handsome boy that I can immediately evolve into an even handsomer boy. Makes me pretty glad I don't have this abomination on my team. Then again, I wouldn't say no. Then moving south towards Vermilion City, I pick up a Titata, an even more awesome addition to the team that also evolves right away. Excuse me, what? I tell you, kid, fire Pokemon saved me during the war. They burned my enemies into paralysis, same as I'll do to you. Aside from the fact that I was literally just threatened with war crimes, I feel pretty good about our matchup versus Surge's fire types. But as soon as he sent out his first Pokemon, Emperona, I felt a lot less safe seeing it Swords Dance, especially since all I do is set up Stealth Rocks. At this point, I really have to commit to my strategy of going for Stealth Rocks and Roar. However, I get confused by Swagger and immediately hurt myself in confusion. Despite that little complication, I am in no position to swap in anything against this buffed up behemoth. So I stay in, and at the very least, Peck doesn't deal too much damage. I also thankfully break through confusion and roar out the Emperona, getting rid of its boost. This sends in Mimitails, which takes some damage from my rocks. In the battle, for whatever reason, I thought I'd broken through confusion, so I stay in and go for Crunch, which ends up working out for me since I take out the Mimitails, but that was way too risky to go for. Realizing I'm actually still confused, I swap out a Tempest into Cataclysm. Fletchcario then hits me with a flail on the switch, but because it's at almost full HP, it does barely any damage at all. It then wastes a turn whipping up a Razor Wind, allowing me to connect with a critical hit super effective Thunderfang. It also transferred over Fletchcario's Sticky Barb, meaning I take a little bit of damage at the end of every single turn. As Surge Potions, I go for a Dragon Claw, which activates Flame Body, but I've got the Shed Skin to get rid of the burn. Of course, that Sticky Barb still has me taking damage at the end of the turn, so I swap out into Hurricane. Fletchcario hits me with a Flail, and then Surge heals all the way up with a Super Potion. Hurricane then hits a Water Gem boosted Aqua Jet, which takes Fletchcario just below half health, which means another one doesn't quite take it out. And even with an unfortunate burn, a third Aqua Jet is able to finish the job. Finally, we're right back where we started, facing Emperona. Because of the potential Sword Stance, I really didn't want to switch out here, but annoyingly, I get confused. It ends up really working out in my favor since I'm able to break through confusion and pull off a Yawn before switching out. The only problem is my entire team is on the verge of keeling over, so I decide to send in Cataclysm. And this is the one time I'm really excited to see the enemy's Swords Dance since it's put to sleep by Yawn. I only get one more move because of Sticky Barb, and unfortunately, it's not enough to take Emperona out. And because Emperona stays asleep, it allows Tempest to come in and put an end to this bittersweet fight with a stomp. Having lost our first Pokemon, we can at least make up for it by evolving a lot of our Pokemon with a new high level cap. Yeah, we gotta give you a nickname. As for our other evolutions, they're both big improvements. Now that we have a lot of dragons, I need to pick up some fusion material, so on Route 9, I decide to catch my first encounter, Koffdu. Not exactly great by any means, but on Route 10, I managed to find a Vigoran. Both Nidoking and Slacking are amazing Pokemon to fuse with. Once we reach Rock Tunnel, I make sure to use Repels until we reach this egg. Because whatever route the egg hatches on will be that Pokemon's encounter area, we can guarantee that our Rock Tunnel encounter is this Noivern, or more precisely, this Noivern Beware fusion. Oh hey, Pukapee wants you to subscribe and is definitely not just flipping us off. By evolving my new fusion materials, I can start putting together some awesome new fusions. And yeah, Charizard and Noivern make a really cool fusion, but this custom sprite is absolutely insane. I also put together Persian and Tyrantrum into possibly the cutest dinosaur of all time. Slacking and Gabite turn into one lazy boy, and Shellking doesn't look too talented. But hey, neither does Gulosian, so at least they've got each other. Hey Antler Boy, what brings you here? Your Pokemon don't look dead. You son of a... With our living Pokemon, we take on the 4th gym leader, Erika. And her first 2 Pokemon are randomized into weenies, so they're easily taken care of by Cataclysm. It's only once she sends in her ace, Dunrunt, that I've got to swap out. I send in Calamity, who once again looks absolutely awesome, but Dunrunt's double edge on the switch deals exactly half. And I don't think Calamity can one-shot Dunrunt, so I swap out into Typhoon. This time Double Edge does more than half, but I've got Hammer Arm. However, I should have known a simple Hammer Arm wouldn't be enough to take out my favorite Pokemon, Dunsparce. Sadly for Typhoon, this means her debut battle will also be her last. At this point, any move will take Dunrunt out, but it did what it came to do, and if we keep losing Pokemon at this rate, we won't have any left by the time we reach the Elite Four. Luckily, as I make my way through Lavender Tower, I managed to find a replacement in Drakid. I'm also forced to wake up Snorlax, giving us some epic fusion material in Darkrai and Mismagius. Now that's what I'm talking about. Our next opponent is Koga, but with ghost types, we've got an excellent matchup with Apocalypse. He easily takes out Koga's first 2 Pokemon, and while a super effective Technician Bite deals a ton of damage to Sandivenant, it gets put to sleep by Hypnosis, so I'm forced to swap out. And with a few Heat Waves, Calamity easily collects the 5th gym badge. Felt good with a nice and easy victory with one of the game's harder fights coming up. But before heading to Saffron to take on Team Rocket, I take my chances in the Safari Zone. I decide to go searching for the first dragon I can find, and I am certainly rewarded by Radel. And I was psyched that he didn't manage to flee. I then made my way to Silphco, and before destroying my rival, I first evolved Cataclysm into Garking and Tempest into Salaking. Deluge also evolves into Gulosian, which is a huge improvement. And these evolutions come at a very appropriate time, since we now have to take on Giovanni in the infamous multi-battle. In a chaotic double battle like this, the more control you can have, the better, which is why I lead with Apocalypse and fake out the Yangoon the first turn so that they only get one move. The Muffisk targets Bulbarath with its Skunk Shot, which is simply enough to one-shot. Hornlad sends in Digwow, which unfortunately doesn't have Intimidate. It takes a ton of damage from Slash and then immediately goes for Earthquake, which hurts both me and the opposing team. At the end of the turn, I hit Yangoon with a Technician boosted Dragon Tail, taking it down into the red and also swapping it out. In comes Drater and Stuffion, a fairy type that's 7 levels above the level cap. Great! I decide to swap out of Apocalypse into Deluge, who's immediately hit by a Thrash. Digwell slashes the Drater, which only sets up Safeguard and thankfully doesn't attack me. I switch out of Deluge, this time into Tempest, to get an Intimidate and lower my opponent's attack. The attack drop means that Tempest doesn't quite take half from the Thrash. And because Drater attacks Digwile, I know I can take another non-crit, so I stay in and take out Drater with a Dragon Claw. Stuffion connects with the second Thrash, leaving Tempest in the red. At this point, we're in a tough spot. Stuffion is now able to switch up its moves, but at least it's confused. So I swap into Deluge as Giovanni heals up Yangoon and takes out Digwile with a superpower by breaking through confusion. Not only does this lower Stuffion's attack and defense, Digwile really wasn't very useful, and I'm glad to see type Kazam. The next turn, Yangon leaves me in the red with a U-turn, but at least Stuffion hits itself in confusion. A Dragon Pulse from Deluge almost takes Yangon out, and type Kazam finishes the job with a Swift. Stuffion connects through confusion, but hits type Kazam with a Pain Split instead of taking Deluge out. I thought for sure we were done for, but a double flamethrower combo means we get through the fight deathless. Oh, how I wish I could say the same about Sabrina. My team is shaping up to be insanely strong, but being strong can be a problem if your opponent finds a way to use that strength against you. After Dragon Tailing out her lead, I Earthquake the incoming Clef Pass. I wanted to get rid of this fairy type as soon as possible, but Sabrina would do the work for me. With Metronome into Explosion, she revealed her secret weapon, Y-Pass. Because of Shadow Tag, I was locked in, and as soon as I'd clicked Earthquake, the palm of my hand found my face faster than you can say counter. Like a deranged maniac, I was shouting, Dragon Tail! Dragon Tail at my monitor! But it was too late, and the damage was already done. Cataclysm could easily handle the rest of her team, consisting of 2 more Nose Pass fusions, and I swore to myself to never make such a stupid mistake ever again. And so it's time to bring out the big guns, fusing together Rayquaza and Salamence into Salaquaza, and then Blastoise and Dragonite into Dragistoise. With my new and improved team, I go up against Blaine, calling himself the Master of Dragons. Pathetic, and I need to put this man in his place. Honestly, they'll let anybody be a gym leader these days, and with a team as pathetic as this, I'm surprised he isn't ashamed to be a part of the Pokemon League Association at all. But with Blaine defeated, we've got some actual problems. Before we can collect the final gym badge from Giovanni, we have to defeat his abomination Zapmokuno in a 3v1. And because one of his 3 birds packs Stab Ice Beam, we've got to be very, very careful. Not dealing with Zapmokuno A as fast as possible could be absolutely disastrous. To hopefully not get sent back to Pallet Town, I crafted a plan. Turn 1, I send in Deluge and fire off a flamethrower against Zapmokuno A. And with a held fire gem, I won't have to worry about it ever again. Moltres connects with a flamethrower of its own, which we quad resist. Thunderbolt is only resisted once, but we don't take too much damage because of Deluge's massive special defense. I get chip damage with Muddy Water, and with my luck, of course that gives Zapmokuno Z a special attack boost because of an Absorb Bulb. Due to Tailwind, the birds even outspeed me now, so I just have to stay in and unfortunately let Deluge go. I send in Cyclone, who quad resists the flamethrower, but Thunderbolt deals neutral damage, taking it down all the way to 17. Cyclone is able to take out Moltres with a Water Gem boosted Aqua Tail, leaving only the big problem. I swap Calamity into a Drill Peck, and finally Tailwind peters out, allowing me to outspeed the next turn with a Fire Gem boosted Flamethrower, before Zapdos sends me into the red and gets the Paralysis, forcing me to swap out again, this time into Cataclysm. She's not a ground type, so Thunderbolt still connects, and Dragonclaw isn't quite able to take Zapmokuno out. With a bit of luck, Cataclysm doesn't get crit, and we're able to finish the fight the next turn. With Giovanni defeated, we're able to get our first encounter in Mount Ember, Moltres, giving us 2 excellent Pokemon to fuse with, Aegislash and Tyranitar. As for the final fight versus Giovanni, it's finally Armageddon's time to shine. Being a Dark type, this gave me a pretty cheesy out to his Psychic type team. And with my final badge collected, I was ready to prepare for the Elite Four. Going through Victory Road, I knew my odds of getting a new encounter were very slim. But before finalizing my team, I decided to at least see what Articuno randomized into. And oh boy was I happy to see be Reshipeed. With one final encounter acquired, it was time to fuse up my Elite Four squad, starting by fusing together Garchomp and Salamence into the ultimate Intimidator, at least after fixing the sprite. I then fused Charizard and Rayquaza into Rayazard, Noivern and Tyranitar into Tyrannovern, Reshiram and Blastoise come together to form Reshistoise, and finally Armageddon evolves into Dark Drygod. And so I'd managed to make it to the Elite Four with a full team of 6 dragons. My fusions were strong, but seeing Lorelei's first Pokemon, I knew this would still be an uphill battle. I get off and Intimidate with Cataclysm before swapping out into Ragnarok. In this classic showdown between Rayquaza and Deoxys, I'm immediately punished by a critical hit. This sucks since I learned in the pre-fight conversation Lorelei has a team full of fighting types, and she just severely weakened my only flying type. Lorelei strangely goes for a full restore after just taking chip damage from Sandstorm, which allows me a free Air Slash. She then goes for another full restore, and I was kicking myself that I didn't just go for another Air Slash, but at least I healed up my health with Roost. My next Air Slash at least gets a critical hit, taking Deochamp low enough that the Sandstorm chip is enough to take it out at the end of the turn. Second, she sends out Primechilla. Because Calamity's a Dragon Rock type, I swap out into Hurricane to take a fighting move, but I'm struck by a super effective Outrage. Not only does it deal a ton of damage, it doubly sucks since I now have to swap one of my dragons into an Outrage. I decide on Cataclysm since at least that way I'm able to get off an Intimidate to lower its damage output. Primechilla is also an electric fighting type, so I can easily take it out with an Earthquake the following turn. Venilok comes in third, so I hit it with a Fire Fang, and I'm very lucky that Bug Buzz doesn't just take me out. And because Cataclysm is part ground type, we don't take damage from Sandstorm. Even so, I really didn't want to miss a Fire Fang, so I swap out into Cyclone as Lorelei withdraws into Amazing. Amazing? Amazing? Who knows? Regardless, this is a pretty bad spot to be in, since this thing probably has no guard, and I really can't swap anything in. It was probably a mistake to swap out of Cataclysm, but I really didn't want to get hit by a Mach Punch. So I've got no choice but to stay in and hope this thing doesn't have Levitate. My Earthquake does connect, and Lorelei just goes for a Scary Face after healing up with a Citrus Berry. She then oddly swaps out of Amazing into Milky. Milky comes in on an Earthquake, which unfortunately deals just below half. I then get Wake Up Slap down to 60 HP before taking Milky out with a Play Rough. But once Milky goes down, Lorelei sends back in Amazing, and I have to switch because of her previous Scary Face. What had I just done? With all of my Pokemon either at super low health or weak to fighting, there was no good option. Ragnarok was able to clean up her remaining weakened Pokemon, but already losing a Mon against the first member of the Elite Four? It felt so good entering the Pokemon League with a full team of 6, but losing Calamity in the very first fight, it's almost like we entered with 5. This means each of our dragons is just gonna have to work that much harder, and learning that Bruno had a team full of electric types certainly didn't hurt. I was gonna switch out immediately into Garchomp, but I realized Armageddon has Earth Power, so there's really no reason to switch, and after burning through a couple of Bruno's full restores, I'm able to take out Lux Bunny with a few Earth Powers. Second, he sends out Uncode, which I immediately destroy with a Stab Dark Pulse. Thirdly, he then sends in Volt Magus, connecting with a resisted Discharge, which unfortunately gets the paralysis before Volt Magus also falls to a Dark Pulse. Fourth out is Roserade, but because I'm paralyzed, I decide to swap out into Ragnarok. This way, I can take out Roserade with a couple of flamethrowers. Finally, he sends in Golray, so I swap out into Cataclysm. And with a second Earthquake, I claim an easy victory against Bruno, giving me a sense of confidence going into the fight versus Agatha. Just maybe our dragons will be able to take this all the way. She leads with Hound Palm and sets up with Nasty Plot as I go for a Surf, which almost takes Hound Palm out. Agatha heals up with a full restore, and my second non-crit Surf doesn't do quite as much. Hound Palm desperately tries to hurt me with a quad-resisted Flamethrower, but to no avail, allowing me to take it out with a third Surf. Politar comes in second and sets up the Sandstorm. And after seeing that Fusion Flare is not very effective, I realize Politar is a Water Dark type. I'm lucky it missed its Dynamic Punch, but seeing that it even has it is terrible news, so I swap into Cataclysm as she just heals with a full restore. I then go for a Dragon Gem boosted Dragon Claw, taking Politar below half before it sends me out with a Circle Throw. This swaps in Cyclone, which is a pretty terrible matchup, but at least Cyclone's faster and I don't miss the Play Rough to take Politar out. out. Third, Agatha sends in Chanrock, which does have Intimidate to lower Cyclone's attack, but being part Chansey and quad weak to fighting means you definitely don't survive a Hammer Arm even at -1. It's then Agatha reveals her Clefairy. Fairy types are our greatest weakness, and of course one had to be combined with Darkrai. I swap out into Hurricane as Clefairy goes for Metronome. And of course it would get Psystrike, which at least doesn't do too much damage. But at the end of the turn, Clefairy doesn't take any Sandstorm damage, leading me to think it has Magic Guard. It then sets up with Minimize, and of course I miss my Surf. With its next Metronome, it ends up getting Whirlwind, sending Hurricane away and forcing me to bring out Ragnarok. Darkrai outspeeds the next turn, going for Metronome again, and this time getting Draining Kiss. I don't even do particularly good damage with a Stab Air Slash, so I decide to swap out, this time into Cyclone. It hits me with a Double Slap, so I'm thinking maybe if I can connect with a Play Rough, I can actually pull this off. It Metronomes into Stomp, but I don't flinch and manage to connect with a Play Rough, but it just isn't quite enough to take Clefairy out. All I need is one more move, but Clefairy rolls Dragon Hammer, which Cyclone just narrowly survives on 1 HP. And while this means she was the hero we needed, no good deed goes unpunished, and our brave hero falls to Sandstorm at the end of the turn. At this point, Agatha only has one Pokemon left, Darkbach, and with a Stab super effective Earthquake, Cataclysm can easily get us the victory. But in order to make it all the way, we still have 2 more fights to beat, with only 4 of our team members remaining. First, we face the normal type master, Lance. He starts out with a Dunlee, and last time we faced fighting types, or a Dunsparce for that matter, things did not go too well. I pivot out of my dark type as fast as I can to get off an Intimidate, but Dunlee has Dragon Rush. There's nothing I can switch into that, so I have to just go for an Earthquake, and the second Dragon Rush leaves Cataclysm at 13 HP. Lance starts spamming full restores, but it's good to get those out of the way as early in the fight as possible, and eventually I take out Dunlee with a second Earthquake. Second, he sends out Primecy, so I swap out a Cataclysm into Ragnarok, dodging a Stomping Tantrum in the process. I then connect with an Air Slash, which not only does over half, it also gets the flinch, allowing me the KO on the following turn. Third, he sends out Lulax, so I gauge some damage with Air Slash, which isn't too good. But considering how little his punishment did, I go for another Air Slash and then get hit by an Ancient Power. And thank Arceus Lance didn't get the Omni Boost there, because that would have probably been the end of the run. I swap out into Armageddon, and with a super effective Dark Pulse, I'm able to take Lulax into the red, activating its Citrus Berry. At the end of the turn, it just hits me with a resisted Hydro Pump, allowing me to take it out with a Dark Pulse the following turn. Fourth, he sends in Mellowlure, so hoping it's a Ghost type, I stay in and go for Dark Pulse, which isn't super effective, but I manage to get a flinch. A second Dark Pulse gets Mellowlure to the red, and it hits me with a Relic Song, transforming it into a much uglier sprite. A third Dark Pulse seals the deal, and all Lance has left is a Chanrus. And if this thing has Ice Beam, it could potentially be a problem, so I swap into my Water type Hurricane. However, it just hits me with Egg Bomb, so I decide to play it safe and burn it with Will-O-Wisp, meaning the next Egg Bomb does substantially less. I then go for a Fire Gem boosted Fusion Flare, which does a lot more than I expected against Chansey's massive special defense. Meaning with the damage from burn, another Fusion Flare is enough to take out Chanrus, granting us victory against Lance without losing any of our 4 remaining Pokemon. And so my dragons had made it from tiny hatchlings all the way to the champion. Sure, there's only 4 of them left, but losing is not an option with victory so close. Hornlad has been tormenting me throughout this entire playthrough, but this time, I'm gonna make sure it's the last. He leads with Dark Buffet, but it doesn't seem to have Shadow Tag since I'm able to swap out of Cataclysm into Armageddon. Annoyingly, he makes sure to set up his evasion with Double Team as I do so. I then hit him for some damage with Ominous Wind as he sets up with another Double Team. Just to show him who's boss, not only does my next Ominous Wind get a critical hit, I also get the Omni Boost, which of course he deletes the very same turn with Haze. It's the typical Wobbuffet experience. Anything you do is pretty much pointless. I do eventually pick up the KO, and with an Omni Boost no less, but alas, no Omni Boost. Second, he sends out Amphifan, and the one move I still have PP for is Earth Power. And after being Thunderstruck, I'm able to take Amphifan out with a second one. Once Hornlad sends in Blastgar, I'm pretty much out of moves that I'd like to hit it with. I used up all of my Dark Pulses and Ominous Winds trying to hit that Wobbuffet, so I swap out of Armageddon into Cataclysm. Blastgar then starts charging charging up a Skull Bash which boosts its defense. It connects the next turn, doing some pretty minuscule damage after the Intimidate, and I manage to get that defense back down again after a crunch. Blastgar then sets up Rain Dance, and I go for super effective Earthquake since I now know it's not Ghost. Hornlad then reveals Milokiss. Great, another fairy type, exactly what my dragons needed. This is not what I wanted to see so close to the finish line. Milotic then misses a Hydro Pump as I try to Earthquake a flying type. That's pretty good news though, since it means Milokiss actually isn't a fairy type. Even so, in the rain, it's still able to take out Cataclysm with a Hydro Pump. It's now a 3-on-3 as I send in Ragnarok. Milokiss sets up Safeguard, but Ragnarok has no way of inflicting status, so I just go for an Air Slash, which isn't quite enough to take Milokiss out, but a couple uses of Extreme Speed does the job as it misses another Hydro Pump. Hornlad then sends in
Mr. Lie.
That is Nightmare Fuel, and possibly an Ice Fairy type. Even so, it seems too risky to switch, so I go for a Flamethrower, not quite dealing half. After seeing it go for Psychic, I decide to swap out into Armageddon, which works out perfectly since it goes for Psychic again. It outspeeds me and goes for Safeguard, allowing me to hit a free Dragon Pulse. But it must be a speed tie since Armageddon's faster the following turn, taking Mr. Lie out. Finally, Hornlad only has his starter Clink Bunny left. It connects and paralyzes with Zap Cannon, but you just can't stop Armageddon. Even connecting with a second Zap Cannon in a row could ever be enough to halt Hornlad's imminent end. And so I'd done it. I'd managed to beat a Pokemon Infinite Fusion Hardcore Nuzlocke using only Dragon Fusions. And this run definitely confirmed one of my suspicions. Dragons are really cool. Oh, but make sure you subscribe, or else Mr. Lie will find you.